Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Today, I'm going to talk about Donald Trump and about revenge and how it works and why it doesn't work, and what his chances are for re-election. And I'm going to explain why Donald Trump is not going to be re-elected, why he's going to lose most of his supporters, and why this is happening. People are pushing and pushing and pushing for Donald Trump to be reelected, and you've heard about the big lie and all that. And so we're going to kind of clarify why this is happening, and to go on and look at all these ideas. And the reason I'm doing it is not because I have a vendetta against Donald Trump, because I don't believe in revenge, but because the exit strategy for Iraq, I'd like to compare this to what happened with the grand lie that was told to justify the Iraq War. And that's our first government proposal. So this is a body of knowledge, a large body of knowledge that is associated with our first government proposal. It's like what the Stations of the Cross that Christians do. You learn, focus on one lesson, and then this lesson, this lesson, this lesson. All of our government proposals do that. And then the first two are dependent on each other. Okay, now, and the reason I'm saying that is this, because we're at the beginning of a new cycle. We're at the end of the old cycle and the beginning of the new cycle. And the old cycle, there's always two teachers, so to speak, two people, and they're always one to stand on the principles and one is the application of the principles. When the Catholic Church started, for example, there was St. Peter was the principles and Jesus was the application of the principles. So that was the start. And then at the end of the cycle, based on St. Malachi's prophecies, those are pretty interesting. What happened was there are two popes at the end, and St. Francis is actually not the last pope, but he's the beginning of the new cycle. So we're the cycles all lined up from everything moves in cycles, like a life cycle, for example, or a year, an hour hand, a clock. That's a pretty good way to show it. Everything moves in cycles. So what's happening now is that at the end, how about a restaurant, and it grows to a certain level, and then it has to decide whether it's going to go up, down, or straight ahead. You can either walk out, you can walk out, or you can let it die, or you can go up and come up with a new idea and expand it. Our democracy is either going to end through a war, a civil war, or end losing, or it's going to just die out because the existing structure doesn't solve problems. If they don't listen to people, what will happen is it will just die out. And if it goes up, it becomes the international government that we're working to create. Because it's like, if it can successfully solve this problem, then it goes up, or it dies or goes down. So you see, we're at a point where we have a solution, but we have to solve this problem. We have to understand what we've done wrong. And this applies on every level, on the individual level too. If you are in crisis and you're facing your end-of-life crisis, if you have cancer and all of these things have happened, then basically, are you going to take this information? Are you going to find the cure for cancer? A lot of people do that. They start, I've got an incurable disease, I'm going to start to look for a solution. Okay, and then they find somebody who offers a solution, but it isn't always necessarily based on the root cause. So all of these things are all part of this idea on an individual basis, on the national basis, and on international basis, and on the galactic basis, because we're now looking at UFOs and how we're going to deal with, if those UFOs are out there, there are also sentient beings out there, and we have to deal with those sentient beings too. So we have to successfully end our cycle here before we can go out there. Okay, are we going to create the Space Force and then shoot each other like Star Wars against the Empire and kill each other off into space, or why don't we just solve the problems here first? And then when we go into space, everybody's working together, and one country isn't bankrupted by doing that. Or where does all the money come from? Is this what happens? Is this okay? So it's always finishing one step before you go on and doing the next step. Okay, so, but as people are going down, they're going down into power games, and the games have to end for it to happen, like a divorce. Okay, if you're going through a divorce, the games have to end. You cannot have the revenge going on and the character defamation. You have to be able to sit down and talk. And what happens at that point in time is that the people who have all the power games, let's say Republicans now are playing all the dirty power games, working with Trump, playing dirty power games, and they're coming down in power. And the people who are assuming responsibility are rising in power. Joe Biden, his approval rating is higher, but he has to also be able to prove that he can solve the problems. That's what Barack Obama was doing. He had a problem, he went out and he was looking for solutions. He was looking and looking and looking for solutions. He turned it over to the experts, but then he went out looking. And that was probably one of the most remarkable things that any president has ever done, is go out looking for solutions amongst the people, because the people have solutions. So when they shut their ears to the people and they just go on with their own agenda, then it's kind of like, okay, we're going to get rid of you. But then when they become tyrannical and unstoppable, this is what we're looking at now, is the tyranny, the unstoppable, how to stop the unstoppable. Okay, so let's get started. Revenge brings together, there's 7 power games known as the 7 deadly sins, and revenge brings together 5 of them. Okay, this is why our Pentagon is shaped the way it is. It's my line kind of messed up here, but that's okay. Okay, it still is demonstrating what I wanted to do. Okay, so let's say that it brings the war. It starts out with somebody who wages war, and that sets the stage for genocide. That sets the stage for massacres, then for slavery and human rights violations. And this also has some elements of greed in it, and for a reason I'll show you. And then what we have is an anger leading terrorism, and that justifies this war. Okay, so in the Iraq War, we had George Herbert Walker Bush wage the war. That was the Gulf War. That sets the stage for the Iraq genocide that people call the Iraq War under George W. Bush. And then that sets the stage for the coalition countries to come in, play the game of greed for the government contracts and things like that. Let's say the promises that were made. Okay? And then all they had to do is bring 10 soldiers, and then they were going to get government contracts or whatever was promised them. We're still liable for what was promised. Bush promised them. Then that set the stage for let's say the sociopaths to come in, the people who lie and weave an illusion, and the let's say the hierophants, the people who work to control. That this is what led to ISIS, and this is what led to the terrorism, acts of terrorism, because people were not listening. They had no voice in their government, and that justified George Herbert Walker Bush and the Iraq and the Gulf War. Okay, because by denying people a voice, let's say that the truth, they didn't want the truth of what led to the wars to come out. And that's why history is always being rewritten by the winners because that happens. Now, we're also looking at this with racism, the issue of racism, because that's an act of revenge too. Let's say if you can put somebody down, you can judge them. If you can judge them, you can take what's theirs. If you believe that you can take what's theirs, then you can own them. Slavery, we're talking about 1619, and then you can deny them a voice. So if somebody's being denied a voice, just kind of imagine that it has to do with revenge. Now, the problem with revenge is that nobody's in agreement with what you're doing. Okay, so let's say this. If you have somebody like playing the game of greed, the people here lack respect. The people who do that lack respect. And what they do is they believe the revenge will help them get respect. And what they want is right over here, a combination between capacity and a voice. Okay, if they believe that they get revenge with the idea that they are going to get capacity and a voice. An example of this is not pride, but lust, is Donald Trump. And you can tell because if you look at this pentacle of power, it's a power based on power games. The lust wants a combination of right here. They believe that the people who play this game come from a fear of intimacy. They fear being hurt. So what happens is they come together. They believe the revenge is going to get them a combination of anger, of a voice, and abundance. So Donald Trump is playing his power games of revenge. He's getting his revenge on President Obama, on the Bidens, on the Clintons. Those are the three main. By getting revenge on those people, he believes he's going to get a combination of a voice and abundance. So he sits and tweets all the time. Trump sat for 4 years, tweeted hundreds of thousands of tweets, many tweets at one time. It wasn't just say, okay, I started this new program, everybody vote for it, support my program. It wasn't that. It was, all of these voices, anger, and that tweeting gave him a voice. He had no voice, and now he had the voice. He believes that he had capacity and respect. I'm important. I have a lot of money. He said, I'm a billionaire. I have money. I have wealth. Respect me. I know how to fire people. I'm a businessman. I have a capacity, and I have respect. People respect me. But what was happening is people didn't necessarily respect him, and it created this division, more division. But the Iraq War did the same thing. The genocide, that was based on a sense of judgment. And Donald and George W. Bush believed he lacked capacity, so he got revenge on Saddam Hussein with the idea that he would get respect and abundance. How about if he was going to get respect? I'm a war president. That's what he said. I am a war president. Respect me. I am a war president. And then control of natural resources, oil reserves. By getting revenge on Saddam Hussein, he was going to topple Saddam Hussein and get control of the oil reserves and respect because he was a war president. Okay, so this is a very, very remarkable diagram because it tells you what people want. The only problem is you can't always nobody's in agreement. There isn't anybody standing here helping you get it. And that's where the real problem runs when you're getting revenge. Revenge doesn't work. It's not a tool for creating the life you want. You can't build anything with a sledgehammer. You can only demolish things. You can't bulldoze something down and expect to create it. Okay, so now what does work is what helps everybody get what they want is, to get Donald Trump or anybody off your back. You have to help him get what they want. But you can't reinforce the games. And this is where the Republicans are making their big mistake, is they keep reinforcing his power games with the idea that they're going to scoop up those 74 million voters. The only way we're going to get reelected, they say, is if we cheat. So they're coming up with all these laws that deny people their right to vote, denying people. So now, rather than just limiting their acts of revenge to the minorities, now they're doing it on the Democrats. And the Democrats are standing on the principles and saying, you're destroying the democracy. You know, it's like a bigger group. They've taken it. It didn't work. Their Black Lives Matter and all those movements were taking away their votes. Now they had to go to taking it there, but they didn't stand on the principles. Their plan wasn't that they finished up here and they went to the next one. So what do people want? So that's the idea, is what do people want? And that's where the world peace marketing strategy comes in, because it gives people what they want. Okay, it divides people up into the four groups. For the people this is a movement has started, the people who stand on the principles are basically want to be able to get back their lives after being slammed by the people who are playing power games. You know, so this top row is for the people to work together with a sense of tolerance, basically, to build the foundation back to square one. Okay, let's say this. Let's say that a family has a husband and wife have gotten divorced, are in the process of breaking apart. The husband is working late. We have our California Community Property Law project this is an example of how this fits into this. Okay, so in California, if you have let's say a wealthy man marries a trophy wife, and she gets old, and she's looks in the mirror, and she's getting older, and she's afraid that her husband is going to leave her and have an affair with a younger woman, and she's out. So her financial support is affected by this, by her getting older. So she's putting all the creams on and all the lotions and watching all those videos that tell you how to knock 10 years off your life. You know, but what happens is that the marriage coming to an end, or is it just a fear that's cropping up because she's getting older? She doesn't know if it's the end of the cycle yet, but she sees the end of the cycle coming. But it's not necessarily there. So what happens at that point in time is that she might go to her friends who are saying, oh, my husband is having an affair. Oh, you poor dear. But the friend is not necessarily looking out for her friends, the original woman's best interest. If she's a real friend, she would be. And she might be giving her advice, don't worry, he loves you. Don't worry. He's not having an affair. He's just working late, I know, because my husband is with him all the time. And he's, you know, if it's the good thing, yeah, they're working late, don't worry. In fact, you're welcome to go there and stop and see him and bring him some dinner, you know, or whatever. You know, go and see and bring everybody a plate of cookies. You guys are working late, I'm going to bring you cookies. Okay, in fact, let's all the wives go do that, you know. Okay, so then what happens is then you'll know, okay, or whatever. I don't know what people are going to do. You know, that's up to them. But what happens is when it's happening like this, then you have the husband and the wife fighting, getting revenge. The wife might go off, find the friend, and then the children are affected, the marriage is breaking apart, and then the people who function for their own interests. So when we're looking at this act of revenge, where people are coming together, let's look at this. What would happen if Donald Trump, from another perspective, what would happen if Donald Trump goes to Vladimir Putin and says, I'm getting revenge on Obama, the Clintons, and the Bidens. Okay, I need your help. I need your intelligence. Okay. And so all of a sudden, he is going outside the country. Is he functioning as the wife who's going out to get help? Or it could be the husband doing it too, going out with his buddies and, my wife is having an affair or whatever. But what happens then is that we have the families being affected, and then the neighbors are coming in. So everybody has to kind of get what they want. If somebody is going outside, how about in the Democratic Republic of Congo? What happened was on the eastern border with the blood diamonds, we're going to defend ourselves not by going to Kinshasa and getting military aid to come in and help us, but by them going and getting help from the United Nations coming in. Okay, were the United Nations functioning for their best interests? Okay, or their own interests? Or how about them going out, the fighters going out and taking diamonds, blood diamonds, and buying arms and coming back in and getting into this fight, this genocide, okay? So having the genocide spread into the Democratic Republic of Congo killed many, many people, millions of people. Okay, so this is happening on every level. So the thing is, everybody has to get what they want. And the thing is, let's say for the judge during the divorce to do this, the judge has to go through, because it's character defamation, it has to go through various steps that allow people to understand what's going on. So this is the first step. The first step is understanding how revenge works, why it doesn't work, how there's this whole big body of understanding associated with it. Okay, if it just goes to court, the existing structure isn't working. Okay, it can't solve problems. And there have been court cases where people are so angry that it was so unfair the way it was resolved that wasn't resolved, and they've gone in and killed the spouse or killed their kids and the spouse or whatever. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison because my life is over because of what this judgment against me was. Going to court is a terrifying thing when your life is dependent on it. It's always a terrifying thing for people. You look at the judges and you look at the attorneys and they're going, okay, yeah, we're prosecuting attorneys, but the people whose lives are being affected are, you don't always see what happens in the shows, TV shows. Okay, now I'm going to say for people to get their life, what we're doing is the exit strategy for Iraq, the proposals for that. And that is, we start out understanding how revenge works, why it doesn't work, why you can't get your life by getting revenge, because there isn't anybody there. So what happens if Donald Trump thinks that revenge is going to help him become president of the United States again? He's going to just keep harping about Obama, the Clintons, and the Bidens, and he's going to have his list of enemies, and he's going to just undermine them. Okay, if Lisa Murkowski sides with the Democrats, I'm going to primary her and get her out. And then he has all this power that he really doesn't have. When the power that he had came from when he swore his oath of office, because then he had the Constitution behind him. Primarying somebody is okay, except it can backfire on you, because if she's actually doing her job and doing a good job, Donald Trump is not going to be able to primary her. He's not going to be able to do it, because we've had all these evidence of people who are now people who basically, let's say, don't even know how the government functions, or are there and they're just going to play this power game and be tyrannical and push. Okay, now what people want is this, a voice in abundance, but they can't get it by doing this. So now what we're doing is we see the four levels. We see the people who stand on the principles, the people who are playing the power games, the people whose lives are affected, and the people who function for their own interests. And you can tell all of this information is all part of this world peace marketing strategy, because it enables every person on the planet to get what they want. Okay, but they have to do it themselves, because nobody's going to give it to them. If you want to get an education, nobody can just kind of like cram that information into your head. You can't sleep and have it just go in, although maybe some people have tried that and it works. I don't know. But you can't just have somebody else take your test for you and get an A and then say, hey, I got an A in school, because you didn't. You're demonstrating not capacity, and by lack of capacity, you play the game of envy to get respect, which you don't get when you're acting like a fool, and you don't get greed, because that's not where money comes from. You have to be functioning from within your own capacity to be able to get abundance, not stealing money, because then you lose it. Okay? So the power games don't work. They're coming from a lack, and you reinstate the lack. So what you have to do is you have to, let's say business people say, walk the walk and talk the talk. Okay? All right. So for the people who want principles, when you've been slammed like by revenge and everybody seems to be up against you, you have to rebuild your life. You have to understand how to rebuild your life. Okay, for the second row, people who are in it for the money and power, grabbing for power, those are the people, what they need to do to get a sense of abundance and power, and is to be responsible for their own financial support. Okay, if Donald Trump supporters, many Republicans say, oh, we are going to support Donald Trump because he's going to make America prosperous again, and we're going to be able to make money. We're going to have those tax cuts, the promises of the tax cuts. So they have to assume responsibility for their own financial support. The backbone of any business of government economy is small business. So they have to start small businesses. But how do you do that is you follow these steps right along here. It's like the stations of the cross, like it said, and you go right across each of these rows, and then basically the people who function for their own interests are down here, and those are the people that we have talked about with the idea of this and making waves. They're making waves, they're intolerance. Okay, maximum pressure. Donald Trump saying maximum pressure. We have to use maximum pressure. Well, oppression leads to inequality. And the backbone of the legal system is that everybody has to be considered equal, because for conflict resolution, that's the first requirement. Everybody has to be considered equal. So as people are playing the games, they're coming down in power, and the people who are assuming responsibility are rising in power. And when they hit the point where they're on that same level, where then what happens is conflict resolution is possible. And so our protocol, the first government proposal stops all of this stuff. It stops all of these things. But it's like an education that we're looking at right now. We are looking at understand that, if you're getting revenge in a movie or vendetta, hey, that's exciting, but it doesn't work. You can sit back and kind of say, maybe that I don't like watching those movies anymore. They're thrilling, but they're not really something that leaves me feeling enlightened and at peace. I just feel kind of dirty after watching those, maybe. But what happens is, the first one is you have to be educated and to understand how this works, why it doesn't work, and what works instead. What if that doesn't work, what will work? And then you start on this next level. Okay? If marriage is broken apart and your family's torn apart, and the judge basically gave your wife half of everything, and now what happens if she's spiraling down and she says, I'm going to marry you for your money, and I'm going to have a baby, you told us together, and then we're going to spiral down and we're going to get a divorce? What happens if you don't want a divorce? What happens if you love your family and you have to rebuild your family again up here? So what you want then is to be able to successfully stop this one level, to complete it and to be at peace with it, and then to be able to expand to the next one. And in court, instead of this character defamation campaign where you end up devastated, we're introducing a protocol for ending conflicts like this based on revenge. Now we're going to go back 5,000 years and we're going to look at Stonehenge. And Stonehenge, our second part of this. So once you have the body of knowledge, then what we're going to do is we're looking at Stonehenge and Oxford. Conflict resolution and unification are like two sides of the same coin. And then we go to mediation, where everybody has a chance to come in and speak. And then we have the court case. Okay? So now, if we're ending the Iraq War, pulling out of the Iraq War, where everybody is successful and we can take this to the next level, like proving our Constitution actually works to maintain peace, wouldn't you say that we need to have a fair and equitable legal system before we can take it to the next level? Do we want to shoot each other in space, or do we want to solve conflicts on Earth and then everybody work together to go out into space? Okay, see how that works? It's like let's do this right and then take it to the next level where everybody works together and everybody's functioning on a higher level. We all know people who have basically had nobody to help them and ended up broke because their business wasn't able to survive. Okay, so what happens next is then the court case comes. Not the court case when everybody's angry with each other and they're going to nickel and dime each other to death, and I'm going to take all your money just by nickel and diming you. I'm going to, those attorneys are expensive, so we're going to just keep fighting and fighting, and then I'm going to get my revenge that way. That happens. And it's like, if this is not fair, we need to deal with this, and then we need to all work together. And when we all come together as a family, so to speak, as a family, as a country, as a family, where a divorce, a clan, rather than all the kids are happy because moms and dads are working, all four moms and dads are working together and everybody's getting their life. You see, that's what we want, is we want to be able to take the United States and our democracy forward to the next level. We don't want to have it go down into power games and war. We don't want to have people fighting in space. Why do we have to do that when we can talk on Earth and then everybody work together? Or we don't want to not solve the problems when they're existential threats. Are we going to wipe life off the planet like from this pandemic because people were just greedy or whatever? No. So this act of revenge and the individual power games, we have to be educated in this. We have to recognize the power games when we see them. And we have to all understand why it works, why revenge doesn't work, how it works, why it doesn't work, and then what works instead. Then we can start to build our lives on a higher level rather than a lower level. Okay, so the World Peace Marketing Strategy says, okay, this is how the dad or the person who stood on the principles rebuilds his life or her life. This one, how the person who's dependent on this one for their financial support assumes responsibility for their own financial support. And this goes back 2,000 years to the Proverbs 31. A woman of noble character is not dependent on her husband for her financial support. She goes out and she makes sashes, and her husband sells them at the gate. Okay, so now A woman is responsible for her own financial support. A Republican is responsible for his or her own financial support too. Not on Donald Trump, because the trickle-down idea doesn't work. Okay, and that goes on to the next idea. We're going to understand all this body of knowledge and how to rebuild your life. Okay, and then the family, the kids, this is how they get their power back. Okay, children's re-empowerment classes, the family, the life, people, how they get their life back. Not by watching their parents go different directions, but by having everybody work together and to be a financial support, being principal support. Not like a divorced mom taking care of a child and not able to be in two places at the same time. Okay? So now, all of these things can be resolved in this first idea of the first exit strategy for Iraq. And then the last group here, so this is people function for their own interests. What happens to Donald Trump? So let's say that let's say this is going to give us a clue about what Donald Trump can understand, where Donald Trump will end up if he doesn't give up the revenge. Okay, so we have these four groups of people here. The Republican, Donald Trump never got more than a 50% approval rating. Okay, so he couldn't convince the Democrats who stand on the principles, those who stand on the principles. Now, Democrats don't always stand on the principles either. Okay, and he couldn't convince the people like the kids. Okay, because the kids are smart. They know oppression when they see it. So what he had the Republicans and he had those who function for their own interests. Okay, so now that 50% of the people, what happens if the Republicans assume responsibility for their own financial support, and the next group of people he has is the 25% are the people who stand on function for their own interests. So he will never get it if he runs again and he cannot win by only having 25% of the people. Now the problem with that group is that those people who function for their own interests, Donald Trump doesn't have, there isn't anybody here who is in agreement with him if he's taking money and putting it in his own pocket. What do they get out of it? So he will never, by getting revenge, he will never be able to get, because nobody's in agreement. This is a big, if you look at this, we're going to say he's going to have a 0% approval rating. He has, right now, logically speaking, he has a 0% approval rating. He only has one person, and that is himself. He will, at that last point, he is going to be the only person who votes for himself. And I have a feeling that, let's say that if he gets into the next election and he runs again, I mean, he could not get 25%, but it could end up where the Republicans get 25%, the Democrats get 25%, the third party people get 25%, and then the other people are making life hell for everybody else and creating waves and going to prison and creating rebellion and things like that. Under those circumstances, Donald Trump would get 25% of the population. But then at the point where those people go to prison, kind of like the rebellion in Washington, D.C. on the 6th, January 6th, those people are going to prison already. They're being weeded out and they're going to prison, and a lot of those people are going, hey, it's not in my best interest to actually go there and get arrested. So right now, he's either going to have 25%, depending on how those people function, or 0% approval rating. Okay, so like I said, we're introducing a protocol for ending this kind of conflict. And going back to Stonehenge, Stonehenge was built with the idea for conflict resolution. but it was very good for ending wars. But they didn't have any protocol for ending this. They started to understand how to do that, but they didn't have enough. And we'll explain that when we go to Oxford and Stonehenge. We'll explain how those final things happened, but they weren't able to deal with a hostile takeover. They didn't have all the steps lined up with this understanding about revenge. Okay, so that's where we are now, is to understanding about revenge, how it works, why it doesn't work, and what you can do instead, which is this. Okay, but then we have to do the mediation. We have to have conflict resolution and unification. And that's why there was no reason for unification. England went from a whole bunch of small tribes, from the standpoint of small chieftains, whatever they called them in those days, and their groups of warriors. Let's say somebody owned a small area, like a town area, a township area, and then what they did was they came up with the King Arthur idea, where there was one king over all of them, and they had to all swear allegiance. But what happens if at Stonehenge they couldn't figure out how to make that happen, where there was one king? And what happens if the king is climbing the ladder of success and is oppressive to his people? So then there was the Magna Carta and all these other things where people's individual rights were taken. That's why we're looking at all this information right now. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to just recommend that you look at the government proposals. The contingency for this idea is that, let's say, the U.S. government has to agree to the idea. And then we have to, as the counterpoint of this is there's the principles and the application of the principles. So people can go out and say, hey, I like the plan for the international government, but are you willing to actually support it? Are you willing to actually do something? Are you willing to learn this about this and become a student? Are you willing to do that? So this is where it goes. There's the principles here, but there's the application of the principles. Is Joe Biden going to, and his administration? Now his administration is important because let's say that you have Joe Biden saying, I like this idea, and then the government or the Department of Defense says it's not a good idea, we can't defend our country if we pull out all our troops. The Taliban is going to just go crazy, and we're going to do this and do this and do this and this. Everything has to stay right where it is for the time being, and then everybody opens it up for debate, and we learn all this information. And it won't be until the conference in Europe, after all of these ideas have been introduced and people are making a paradigm shift in their thinking, that it happens. So there's the contingency to this plan, and that is we are going to, let's say, hold the U.S. government accountable for this. If Joe Biden is not standing on principles, at some point in time, is he going to pull a Barack Obama and go out looking for answers? Where is he going to find the answers? And who is going to be answering those questions for him? Is it going to be somebody like, if Donald Trump is going out asking for help, is it going to be Vladimir Putin? Okay, so the contingency is that the U.S. government agrees to go along with this idea, and it's going to take understanding that they can't solve the problems. And that's what's happening right now, is we're in this contingency point where the pressure is on him, and people are saying, is he going to listen? Is he going to understand how to solve problems? What is his plan? What is his agenda? He can't just say, we're going to unify the country and say, okay, everybody, okay, do it my way. No, we can't do that. So it doesn't work. Is he going to be able to understand this? And that's the second government proposal, the constitutional amendment idea, because a democracy is of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's the people who are important. So now we have two classes that we have to take. One on revenge, how it works, and power games and why it doesn't work. And then the other one is based on how a government works and why it works that way, and functioning from within the law, reinforcing the law, understanding how it works, the principles associated with a fair government, and they lean on each other. Is it a fair government if it's based on denying voters a voice? No. So there. So now we have these two huge bodies of knowledge that we're all going to be working on. So I have my books, but I'm going to also be doing these videos and giving you an idea. And some people might say, oh, I understand how that works, and just be able to skim right across. And if they run into problems, they can just go back and, understand, read a little bit or something, and then it's not the problem. So some people will say, oh, yep, that makes sense. And other people will say, okay, I need to understand this. I need to go down deeper into this idea. Okay. And some people will spend their entire life working right on that one particular thing. So, anyway, I ask that you like, share, and subscribe. And most of all, share, because this information is important. So thank you for stopping by and listening.